Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of India FinTech Forum, I, Rini Kumar, welcome you all for the online session to discuss will the application of blockchain increase in financial sector post-COVID. So here are a few things to note. So first is that the attendees, you need to enter your name first and then followed by your questions. Ms. Kokila, who is our moderator, will be asking your questions with our speakers. And this webinar is being recorded and it will be published on India FinTech Forum's YouTube channel. So for the moderator of today's discussion, we have Ms. Kokila Alag, who is the founder of Karm Legal Consultants. On the speakers panel, we have Mr. Jitan Chandanani, who is the partner blockchain leader at IBM. We have Mr. Kunal Nandavani, who is the co-founder and CEO of U-Trade Solutions. Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Head Digital Innovation at DCB Bank. And Mr. Satvik Vishwanath, who is the CEO and founder of UnoCoin. So a warm welcome to you all. And with this introduction, I invite Ms. Kokila to take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Rini. Good afternoon, everybody from a very warm, sunny Dubai. That's where we work from. And thank you for the introduction to Karm. And thank you, India FinTech Forum, for having us all here and all the panelists. Now, these unprecedented times, I think in the last 3 months, we must have heard this term quite a bit. But let's now look at that. What happens after these unprecedented times? What do we talk about the most disruptive technology that we've seen since 2008? And just before we go on, a big disclaimer from most of the panelists we've discussed, and we are gonna start with that this discussion for the next 1 hour is going to be on blockchain and the use cases of blockchain. We are not going to be talking about what is cryptocurrency. We are gonna talk about how blockchain is much more than just a cryptocurrency. I know some of the panelists here are co-founder of a cryptocurrency exchange or have launched their own coin. You may talk about your journey, but let's not discuss much about Bitcoin. So today we're going to talk about the potential of blockchain in financial sector, which is, and I have requested one of the panelists, and Satvik's agreed to start with basically taking 2 minutes to tell in a very basic terminology, what exactly is blockchain? We've heard it too many times. And Satvik, if we could have you just explaining it to us, right from the basics of what is a distributed ledger? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, I think before we talk about distributed ledger, let us first see what is a ledger, right? So in the olden days, the way the banks used to manage the accounts is by keeping a book, and where every page was getting dedicated to a single customer, and they used to do the debits and credits on that particular page, and then talk about what is available balance, right? So then on the other side, you also have a logbook where they maintain and keep on appending the transactions every day. So what that logbook is more about who did deposit how much to whom, or who did transfer how much to whom. And that's pretty much all it was. Okay. So now what happens, at the end of the day, they used to do something called reconciliation to understand what is the difference in the balance with the bank that is supposed to be there. Okay, so when it comes to blockchain, so there are little changes to the same concept, but again, it's very, very interesting to know about it. So what blockchain did was, whatever was the pages in this logbook became the blocks. Okay, and in the blog book as well, if you remember, we used to write like brought forward, like BF. So they know that the balance in the previous page was carried on to the next page, and there is like more. It is very similar to PTO or anything we write. Okay, so in the blockchain, what happens? Even though every page is considered like a block, okay, then there is a need to connect these blocks in such a way that they won't jumble up, or the data in that particular block will not change due to it could be haphazardly or it could be intentionally. So any such changes happens in the book. What used to happen was the total used to change. So then they know that, okay, some some change has happened and it cannot be carried on. But in the blockchain, what happens is the hash that is generated using those particular data of those transactions. So once the hash changes, you know that the real data that was entered into the block was different from what is available right now. Okay. So in very simple words, it is just like a normal ledger where you have credits and debits, and every page is linked to the next page. And any change in a single page will make the subsequent links invalid. And this entire setup, which we call it as a blockchain, now we talk about decentralization or distribution. So this entire setup is distributed on hundreds or thousands of computers, or it could be dozens of computers, depending upon the size of the enterprise. And because we have multiple places where the data exists, a failure of one particular computer or a node will not affect the reliability or the availability of the data. So yeah, I think that's pretty much is like what is blockchain in a nutshell.
So would it be appropriate to say that blockchain can operate it as a trusted mechanism for record keeping? Though we all know cryptography has existed for more than half a century. Like I did cryptography law studies 20 years back. Yes. So would you say that blockchain has realized the true potential of encryption for the first time by being more secure, faster,
definitely
reliable?
True. Sure. So see, initially people were afraid to transfer the data from one computer to another computer because there was no cryptographic method of encrypting and decrypting, and people felt secure. Banks came online because of the introduction of SSL or any such protocol. But at that time, we still did not have a complete mechanism end to end for the transfer of value, and I think now blockchain has got that on the plate.
Interesting. So with this, we start, and we're starting with establishing a fact that it's a reliable record keeping system, making it very simple. Some of the techies might not like when I say things like it's a record keeping system, it's a ledger system, which is secure and faster. So with this, we start with, and my first question will be actually back to Satvik and Jitan both on talking about, so we do get news and hints around central bank digital currencies. So though there is talks about it, but do you think, are we ready as a nation for it? And also, what about tokenization of assets? Could that be the first step we start with? So I start with Jitan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kokila. And of course, thank you to India Tech for FinTech Forum for this big opportunity, actually. Pretty impressive list of participants. I'm glad to be here. In terms of, I think we're going to answer the tokenization piece first, if that's okay. Tokenization is a concept. I think it's a fantastic concept, right? I think it's been going on for some time, and I think it's evolved over the whole blockchain discussion. While the idea of tokenization has been used in credit cards for the longest time, where blockchain is further advanced is the idea of, can I actually make any asset tradable at this point? Can I take an asset, digitize it, make it actually tradable, or even can I manage the ownership from a fraction model? That's actually opens up a whole different market altogether. While I think, yes, there are a lot of opportunities for tokenization, in simple fact, like, you know what, can I do personal lending on tokenization by making a syndicated loan altogether? That's probably the most easiest one for me. And especially in a payment system market where payment systems are actually evolving across the board, it could work very well. I keep hearing the story about real estate also could be tokenized very well. And well, I do agree to it, but I'm not really sure if I want to get a 2-bedroom hall where the kitchen is owned by Prasanna and the rest of the house is owned by somebody else and somebody else owns the other rooms actually. So can it be technically done? The answer is absolutely yes. But I think where tokenization takes an interesting turn of events is that creating an asset on one platform should be tradable on another platform too. And I believe that interoperability, we are a little bit far away from at this stage. So while as a concept, it's really great, and it could probably work and evolve as our equities or financial instruments markets have actually evolved, right? If you want to trade an equity share, you go to one exchange. If you want to trade a fixed income or a swap, you go to a different exchange. So yes, it could actually work. But you know what? There are also players who let me kind of hedge my equity trade with a future or swap option in the end of the day. So the market has to mature. some interoperability standards have to kind of figure out, come up from it. And from there onwards, the prompts of tokenization will pretty much hit the roof. So where do I think the reasonability is? Yes, the concept is very good. We'll definitely find a few takers and it's going to evolve in place, but a little more probably going up the curve into technology and how standards need to be established, need to be done. And my last point, I think this would be, and this is, I think, where the governments actually come in, right? I'm a strong believer that what governments need to do is give us guidelines, not in some cases enforce. If you tell me, you know what, from a tokenization trade that I'm doing, what exactly should be my ID management module, what exactly should be my settlement management module, it makes at least certain constructs pretty much set in stone, which then I can then build the creativity around it. And I would probably say in India, that seems to be kind of going well, right? You have organizations like METI, you have NISGs, you have RBIs, IRDAs, looking at certain aspects of setting up these guidelines. So I would say it looks pretty positive from a tokenization aspect. And I would expect a lot to evolve in more use cases in the very near future. And I think that's a good thing for us, actually. That's my viewpoint. Satvik, over to you.
Yeah, okay. So see, when it comes to tokenization, right? So tokenization is not something I think we are introducing it today.
Hi,
right?
I think the screen seems to have frozen, or is it my connection?
Is it normal now? I mean, I'm actually trying to connect from the computer as well. If you can let me in, it's just waiting for the host to let in.
Satvik, you're good. You keep going. I think it's only Kokila. Satvik, you keep going.
Okay, yeah. Fine. I'll just switch from one to another. Give me a second. Hello?
Yeah, we can see you, Satvik. It's good.
Yeah, so that's great. So I was just trying to say that, see, the tokenization that we see today is not the first time, people are experiencing this concept of tokenization itself. So we have heard of various stories that used to happen in Mumbai as well, where because of the lack of Indian rupee coins, they were using bottle caps among a particular community where people were exchanging the caps, which kind of represent a specific value of a coin. So now, as we see, at least within the last 3-4 months, I think it's very evident that the future of the transactions will be more and more digital than it will be physical. And this particular issue of the COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to see things more digitally than try to make everything physically. So one, obviously, because of the security tokens, which is like equity that already like a lot of the companies are issuing, and it's like tradable on the blockchain. And on the other side, very surely we will have the equivalence of commodities. It could be oil or gold, etc. And when it comes to the government or any regulated sectors, we have examples of Telangana, which were experimenting the land to be put on the blockchain, which can be transferred from one person to another person, I think. So when it comes to, the logical progression of this is, if this, whatever experiments that is happening, you can call it as a sandbox level, or it could be like more like a MVP level. But if it continues to become successful, I think the way it will eventually lead to the government as well, thinking on the similar terms, where they want to issue a token which is backed by the real money. So as of now, one of the biggest complaints for cryptocurrencies is that it is not really backed by any other asset, except the fact that too many people are trusting it, right? So if you continue with this similar like logical progression, I think at one point of time the government would also consider releasing their own tokens, which is supposed to be transacted within the KYC verified customers. But again, it kind of comes down to, say, government-owned Paytm, if we can call it in the simple terms. But if they are the one who is completely controlling from end to end, I cannot see how the decentralization is really helping. But at least the technology will make the view on the blockchain and cryptocurrencies to be much more wider, I think.
All right. Sorry, guys, I got logged out and I'm back in, but good to see the discussion still going on. So I do hear you talking about regulatory sandbox, Satvik. Now, this is my question to you and Kunal, again, with the whole cryptocurrency trading and the cryptocurrency launch that you have. How much of a sandbox progress do you see in India? Because currently in the sandbox, in the fintech sandbox, we see cryptocurrencies are in the negative list. So do you see that a sandbox would be an ideal situation, or looking at the international market where the cryptocurrency exchanges have been regulated and operational for quite some time, we can actually skip the part of a regulatory sandbox and go straight away to a license being issued to a digital asset service provider, be it an exchange, be it a custodian, or any other consultant in this space. So this is to both of you.
Yeah, I think I'll just take it first. So I think the regulatory sandbox will be kind of mandatory, at least for some time, because see, India is one of the very highly regulated countries where, at least as far as transaction is concerned, except a small size cash transactions, everything else goes through the organized and licensed channels, right? And at one shot, opening up with the cryptocurrencies, where if we even skipping the sandbox and such, and we don't know what kind of regulations to write yet, because at least the regulations that we have today, a lot of them are not applicable to cryptocurrencies, either because it is not enforceable or people are not following, right? So, and given this particular scenario, I think opening up the sandbox, on one side, I think because of the limits they would give, it would still be a challenge, but again, it will be a small temporary hiccup as compared to just opening the gates and at one shot issuing the licenses without really understanding the ways in which it could affect the present normal regulations in India. Because our regulations in India is not same as the regulations in a lot of developed countries. For example, most of them don't even have the finance-based border controls, and they are fine to do cash transactions for millions of dollars. So it's like, every country has different different views that it has taken, and making sure this goes through a sandbox, I think, will also add a credibility to the industry, and people will start understanding how they want to deal with the different aspects of it, and the exchanges will understand how they want to deal with different, how they should be looking at and what kind of KYCs and such things, etc. is required. And finally, maybe allowing it through a licensing would take it to the next step. So on the other side, I want to highlight that see, cryptocurrencies is just not about not having the backing. I as well see it as a technology than just the speculation or volatility part of it. Except the fact that as a business, I definitely make money when that happens, but that is a different thing, right? So at the end of the day, this particular technology is bringing something very important to the world, which is trying to say that elimination of the intermediaries made the transaction instant and made the transaction free. Okay, and like how, as far as the information is concerned, world is coming together. I think as far as the money is concerned, the world should come together as well, and probably this will be the way it could take if whatever is kind of my analysis continues to be true. I think so. Yeah, given the there are like various things that the country like India would get by manifesting the advantages of cryptocurrency. So on one side, it's a gold lovers country, and we call Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency to be like a digital gold, right? And India is one of the biggest inward remitters, and we lose 7 to 10% of the money for conversion plus transaction fees, right? And then it's a very good IT tech population, and the internet penetration is phenomenally increasing due to Geo. So I think all these significantly become the drivers for an adoption of this kind of experiment to see if it is actually suitable for India. And if it is suitable for India, it will definitely give us an acceleration to compete with the developed countries' economies, I think.
Fantastic. And Kunal, if we could have your view also on the same. Yeah.
So I think I want to add slightly different perspective, which should start by this, that number one, Indian rupee is not a freely floated currency. We should keep this in mind. Unlike US dollar and British pound and euro, for example, Indian rupee whenever you have to spend an Indian rupee outside India, or you have to convert it into dollar or pounds or euros, you have to go through the bank, and every bank, and you have to give a reason. It's either for an education loan transfer, it's for a business transaction, it's for a traveling process, etc. And for those reasons, every single Indian rupee converted into a foreign currency is, through your authorized dealer, bank, or some third party, is being reported to RBI. The reason is Indian government in the past and Indian central banks in the past have had issues of inflation, non-control of the currency fluctuations, which leads to a lot of problems later, because net we are still an importer country. We spend a lot of money on oil, which is priced in dollars, etc. So primarily due to that reason, Indian authorities, including the central bank and the regulators and the governments, are not comfortable allowing for Bitcoin to be adopted, because they don't control Bitcoin. They don't control the supply. They don't control the transfers. The wallet transfers through keys and other means could happen without them knowing. Also, we must remember, India has a very strong FEMA Act, Foreign Exchange Management Act. And for example, if I go to Uno Coin and convert Indian rupee and buy a Bitcoin, for example, and I go to Canada tomorrow and buy a Starbucks coffee, unknowingly, I have violated the FEMA Act of India, which is very, very strict and very, very stringent and very, very strong. So the lack of government's comfort in the process of controlling it is a big concern, which is valid, arguably, up to a point, and they're not willing to budge from it and say that suddenly they'll accept the currency which we don't control, we can't print, we can't quantify, we can't figure out if there are taxless transactions happening as well. For example, the second problem Indian authorities have, besides this foreign exchange and the currency controls, is that they do not, a lot of Indian transactions happen without paying any taxes, whether it's the avoidance of GST, it's the avoidance of income tax. Very few people and very few transactions are actually captured. The moment it goes to Bitcoin, the likelihood of that going up, arguably, it goes high. And that's where the government's discomfort comes in. And hence, they have not been actually supportive so far of the system, that where you could easily, like you Paytm payment or you do any other digital payment, you could do Bitcoin payment as well. In India, it's somewhat not supported and systematically not implemented. And of course, unfortunately, poorly banned earlier, now being allowed somewhere, and it's in the gray area so far. So this is a regulatory aspect which we must not forget, that the backdrop in which all this concept, the global concepts are evolving. I'm not justifying what they do is right. I don't believe that. I do believe Bitcoin and blockchains are great technologies and the right things for the future. And like internet is borderless, cryptocurrencies and blockchain make things borderless possibly. And, all these things are great. But just understanding from the government side, because I've spent some time with them, consulting to them how this may work or how this may evolve. And there are some valid points that they carry, which should be kept in mind. So that's a backdrop I want to bring in. And lastly, regarding the regulation, whether it should go through the sandbox route, probably is the right thing, in which the central banks could learn more about it. And rather than letting it operate in a gray area or let it go completely underground, it's better to know it and then evolve it from there. I think that would have been a better approach. But over time, I'm sure they have tons of other priorities. They have tons of other things to figure out. And net, they are unfortunately very negative on the cryptocurrency world as of now. So hence, there is no clear regulation permitting it. And it's in the negative list within the sandbox environment.
So if one was to come back to this point and say, if we move from a Bitcoin, but we look at the other crypto assets or the other regulators around the world, so like from where we talk about ADGM or Central Bank of Bahrain, or for that matter in Malta, FCA, Japan, we've seen that they've actually defined different forms of we say assets, from security tokens that we mentioned, or we talk about a virtual asset, or call it a payment exchange token, or talking a utility token. So different definitions have come across, and some of the regulators have skipped the regulatory sandbox and straight away gone to giving out these licenses. We did mention about the ease and use case of this. So I would like to ask Prasanna, you about more on a bank stake. So either from, if not a cryptocurrency, then the central bank digital currency discussions are going, and especially what has been launched in China recently. Is there something that we see in India, the talks going say a little more rapid right after the COVID-19, and have we make it easier? Sorry, Prasanna cannot hear you.
So I had kept it on mute. So yeah, thanks IFTA for inviting me for this session. I have heard quite a good views from Jitan and others. So I think we discussed a lot around cryptocurrency so far in the last 30 minutes. So what I want to talk about more on blockchain. So blockchain has a more power to do lot many things for a human being at the end of the day. Banking is one of the sector, or you talk about healthcare is one of the sector, or even you talk about land registration is one of the sector. So if you dig out more, blockchain is more than a cryptocurrency. What we are talking about, digital currency. You mentioned about how China is moving ahead. I think that is all around for their own territory. Coming back in India, we will also work on these aspects. I think I heard very good views from one of our participants, Satvik, I think. So wherein he has mentioned, even Kunal also has mentioned about how blockchain could be useful for a country like India. So I think we should more concentrate on good use cases where lifestyle of human being will be good enough with the help of a blockchain. What we have not achieved with the internet, or what we wanted to achieve with the internet, we have not done that. There comes the technology as a blockchain, which will solve a lot of issues around trust. So today, if I ask you or anybody, would you like to order food from Swiggy or some kind of another app wherein food will be delivered to your home, and that food will be like they will take care of all the COVID norms and the regulations, and you will get a pizza. Still, you will have that lack of trust, right? Wherein tomorrow, if IBM comes, or I think IBM has already experimented those things, that food is coming to you and from farm to the table, each and every activity is being tracked, and the customer just scan on the barcode and comes to know what was the expiry, what was the raw material being utilized. That's bring on the trust. And so that's what I want to say. Come back, what internet had not given to you as a part of a trust, where blockchain will come and will resolve that. So now you just start thinking where all the trust is required. Trust is required in the land registration, trust is required banking operations, and so on. So I think post COVID you will require more trust. Post COVID your consumer require more trust, and all of a sudden your blockchain kind of a emerging technology will become normal technology in next 3 to 4 years. Just imagine the blockchain was just like an emerging technology last year. This year also many organizations are trying it out. More than 20-30 governments are trying it out. There are very good countries like Malta, you mentioned, right? Estonia, Malta, they are becoming now front runner all of a sudden because of a technology like a blockchain. Look at Estonia, the way they have started their journey in 1992s. Every citizen was given with a 110 euros and asked to live the life. And today Estonia has become a template of a blockchain, right? How a country should drive a blockchain kind of a journey. So digital currency or a cryptocurrency is one aspect around blockchain. There are n number of more other use cases, and all of a sudden we are in those use cases. Today we operate on client server model where trust is required. Or tomorrow, what's going to happen with a sharing economy? So today we might be having 10-12 kind of a sharing economy, like a car or a rental houses or a co-working places. So tomorrow you will see next 2 to 3 years around more than 300 entities will go on share economy. What does it mean? It means that the applications will not only reside with one organization. Applications will be a combination of multiple organizations. If I am buying insurance, that insurance has to come from an insurance company. Immediately, I need to get that insurance. And if my car is getting crashed, unfortunately, and the car completely is made of our IoT devices, the whole life is going to be autonomous. So today's consumer, who is a human consumer, tomorrow it will be combination of your IoT devices plus consumer. Now there you will bring on, if you bring on the use cases based upon the internet, then you will ask for some kind of a radical agent which will bring on all these entities, your consumers, service providers on same network. There comes automatically rise of multiple use cases of blockchain, or I would say blockchain becomes a technology which will drive all of these. So digital currency is a one way to look at it. And just to support you, I think in banking post COVID, we will see lot of opportunities where we can optimize our operations and minimize the cost. Straight away we can say let's minimize the resources, but that's not an actual way to really reduce the cost. I think there is lot of cost is incurred into reconciliation or settlement. There are n number of operations within a bank. If I start dig out every operation or every process in a bank is having a scope of utilizing automation. And when I do a full I would say extreme automation, there automatically I need some technology like a blockchain. Somebody is entering in a bank branch and doing some transaction, or based upon his facial expression, I want to identify whether he's happy or unhappy with the help of some beacon or IoT devices. I need a trust wherein I have taken a consent from that customer way back on a mobile device. I need to protect that trust. I think how do I protect that trust in a traditional databases? There comes a solution kind of a blockchain. So if you dig out here onwards, you will see if one of the guys has said removal of the intermediaries. Can I have a complete crypto bank, right? Complete crypto bank without whatever we have done on UPIs or AEPS or current Master Visa or NPS systems? We can certainly convert everything like in a smart contract. But we will not do that. We will slowly adapt blockchain, doing some of the satellite ecosystem. But in a nutshell, you will see rise of crypto banks. May not be in India, but I think some of the country like Switzerland, they are already given some licenses to operate on a crypto bank. So that's the way to look at how the banking will move on. And I think one of our colleague has really explained very well. World is coming closer. It's really, just imagine before pandemic, you would have a global app which will tell you where are the most number of the corona patients or the health index of a particular country. It would have been really helpful, right? And it is all possible. When the communication, when I can send you a message on WhatsApp, somebody sitting in Dubai or US, can I not send money across? The rules, regulations which human has created, I think all of these rules and regulation will go under a reassessment. I think government of India recently, Narendra Modi has said about supply chain. Supply chain has to be an automatic supply chain. A lot of automation is required so that we can reduce a lot of costs around that. I think inherently through Niti Aayog, and there are other non-profit organizations really working hard for how AI or blockchain becomes a mainstream. And I think I should not say boon, but I think during pandemic situation, banks, if you ask me, us, like the customer who was visiting branches, now he would look forward for all of the services on digital channels. I will not be surprised video KYC becomes a mandate. I will not be surprised there will be another kind of an entity will be from RBI that only digital only banks. I think it is already there through form of YONO or something. But I think if you really want to remove these operations on bring on cost optimization for a country, I think we need to embark on technology like AI, blockchain, and cryptocurrency is just one mean. I would say blockchain 1.0, which was an ecosystem which has really given a lot of, I think more than 3,000, 4,000 cryptocurrencies are there. But just imagine I can bring on complete wheat buying, selling on a wheat coin, or a trading of solar energy, which is government of, I think Uttar Pradesh government was trying, or somebody in Kerala government rice selling happens on a rice coin. I think these kind of use cases will be really helpful to reduce on operations. As a country or as a society, we are looking forward for 17 sustainable development guidelines or goals, wherein UN wants these goals to be met by every country by 2030. Some of them are like zero hunger, zero poor, good education, better IT. So I think blockchain itself says that I am eligible for running those goals, or I would say mitigating those goals. Health, right? Just imagine you would have this kind of a very good application like Aadhaar Setu beforehand. I think that's the way to look at. I think here onwards, technology companies like IBM's is doing a lot of experimentation around health or finance. I think this is the right time for companies to come more together, reassess all of our current operations, our banking, and how can we reduce man in middle. I'm not saying man has to be removed. They can be worked on some other task, but just look at when I am sending message across globe anywhere, can I not do similar kind of operations anywhere? And I think banks have understood that. A lot of experiments are done. Our banks, as a DCB bank, we are doing at least 4 to 5 use cases on blockchain. One of them is with the income tax department, other with other few of the banks, wherein customer who has to come to the branch, he can do all of these operations sitting at home on internet banking, provide his 15G relevant things, or reconciliation kind of a use cases which we are working on with some of the other banks, where we can save lot of cost, right? Or even all of these processes will bring on lot of security for all of us. One use case which I'll talk about on ATM security, where whenever I'm opening a ATM, we as a bank, we are looking at an initiative. We want to track all of these ATM opening, who is really opening, who is really coming out there, so that we can reduce, or we can give a proper set of notifications while customer is there in the ATM, or one of our staff is opening ATM. We want to automate this complete whole operations on a blockchain, and we are on that journey. I think as a bank, we are starting with small use cases. Slowly we will look at a bigger use case like trade finance or cross-border payment. But just to support to your question, banking use cases in blockchain, or on a banking or insurance industry, and good to say that we are also part of that journey.
That is really good, Prasanna. And one of the key takeaways for me from your whole talk was that post-COVID, what the global and the society at large, what we recently heard in our discussion, Society 5.0, is actually looking for the term security, the term trust. And blockchain over the last, say, the 12 years, 13 years, say, yes, the blockchain 1.0 was all about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. But now in this era where we've seen many, many use cases, and especially when you talk about your bank taking initiatives and using blockchain as a technology for, say, KYC, for doing AML check on your bank, or putting the transactions, or the basic use of settlements, payment clearance. These are the use cases. And this is what today in discussion we wanted to discuss, that these are the use cases from where we start and then take to
one of the use case which I practice with the World Bank is that in Maharashtra government, research was due during post-COVID, during COVID, but I think soon you will find a mandate portion of water should be recycled. So how do I really track, or how do I really judge as an auditor of coming from the government of Maharashtra that one of the hotel, right, Taj Hotel is really utilizing 5% of water which is recycled. So what we have done with the help of startups, complete recyclation of water followed by the gauging that pH parameter with the help of IoT devices, and that particular standard or gauging at somewhere like 10 o'clock in the morning, we are blocking it to the blockchain, so that tomorrow officer comes and checks, he just have to really see it is a blockchain based systems and have to trust, yeah, this hotel is really utilizing this recycled water. I think these kind of use cases, I can keep on talking more than 50 plus use cases which are not relevant to cryptocurrencies. But I think in future, I think the life is gonna good, and blockchain is gonna be the right radical change agent for that.
You're absolutely right, Prasanna. With the World Bank, there is a project going on, and especially just to mention the use case of blockchain for digital ID. So we recently have the Kingdom of Bahrain actually launching through the Central Bank of Bahrain an entire digital ID program based on blockchain. So these are the use cases which we are now seeing financial institutes making use of it. Now, one of the things that you mentioned about you knowing that from where your pizza has been made and what are the ingredients have been put, and the trust and security is provided. So right just before the discussion, I was talking to Jitan, and I would like him to talk about IBM's Farm Trust program, which does the trace and tracking and has been successful, not just in one part of the world, but globally. So Jitan, if you could just briefly mention about that, please.
Sure, absolutely. So I think, yeah, traceability and provenance is probably some of the best use cases of blockchain. I think once the Bitcoin hoopla kind of went down. And believe it or not, but the actual story of the food trust use case actually started out with an episode at Walmart, where the CMO actually went to a store and threw back a box of mangoes and actually asked the staff to find out where they came from. The true story is it took them 6 hours, 19 days, 6 hours, 6 days, 19 hours, a few minutes and a few seconds to actually come back with the traceability of these mangoes. Now, if you think of this from the point of actually being a disease outbreak or something to actually take place, the company had two options, right? Either I pull back every single mango from all the shelves, or I just wait for the litigation use cases to come in. And that in some cases was the birth of the whole traceability or the food trust platform, where they were like, okay, let's track down who are the participants who should probably be kind of giving information, because the maturity from an infrastructure level of the participants was very different. I have Walmart, the behemoth who can pretty much manage any technology. I had the logistics driver who were good for driving trucks. I had the farmer. So multiple levels of maturity in terms of what infrastructure they actually had. Multiple levels of what information needs to be processed. And the most important burning question, me as a farmer or me as a village proliferation distribution agent, why should I get this information to Walmart? Or why should I add another process step also? So the process pretty much did work about let's go through each participant, let's drive a benefit, a symbiotic benefit across each participant, and then give them something back in return. This is the reason the farmer should put in, because I'll reduce the paperwork. The certification, because you know what, it could result in delay for perishable commodities. The whole solution could actually be tracked, and each participant, we went down, did a business case analysis, figured what to give back, and then actually the blockchain got built. So you had a situation where some participants just got on it because it was probably a revenue opportunity. Some was purely optimization, and some was purely regulation. So the motivation was very different across the participants, but the goal was, and I think the result basically what blockchain actually have done. And of course, that took the birth of Food Trust platform, which has now been expanded to, of course, Carrefour, Dole Foods, pretty much every biggest manufacturer, being Nestle, being like for tracking salmon, tracking leafy vegetables, like tracking coffee. And it's one of the most biggest success stories for us. What we also learned from this is that who exactly are you having the conversation for blockchain with? Because I think the story I keep saying that if I actually was a truck driver for Walmart and I went to Walmart, let's go to blockchain for Food Trust, I guess that would be the end of my trucking contract. So the idea that you have to be the incumbent who can actually rally an ecosystem is extremely important. And that was our learning in the end. So yes, when I actually do get requests from some of the participants about like doing this blockchain use cases, it's great. But can you really rally? And I think that's where we actually learned about who should be work and what kind of networks need to be brought up. And again, those are some learnings. Then I think as additional things actually happen, right? The whole idea of like blockchain shares everything. Nestle doesn't want to share with other companies how it tracks its coffee. Can you maintain privacy? Can you maintain security? Can data not be transferred across networks? Yes, the answers to all of that is yes. And back in the day, if Bitcoin was the only benchmark where all information goes to everybody, did confuse people. I think the concept of food trust has actually enabled that, yes, you can rely on one system for transparency and provenance. And it may actually also result in increase in revenue opportunities also. And it can be used by a multiple set of participants with very different motivations. We're having very similar discussions using food trust actually in India. And this is, of course, for cotton, for spices, for milk, for tea, for coffee. And I believe Niti Aayog by itself is very interested in figuring out traceability options and working with FSA ISS to figure out how it can be applicable. So that's, I think, how Food Trust gave birth. And I think, again, it's continuously evolving at this point of time.
Thank you so much for that, Jitan. We've been personally involved in another project, which is on trace and track, and provenance is for pharmaceutical products. And especially now when we're talking the whole COVID situation where medical health and has moved to telemedicine, e-pharmacy, then how do I secure the delivery of pharmacy? So these are the use cases which we're actually seeing, and coming from UAE, where the government's whole motivation and drive since 2016 has been that the entire government section or even the semi-government will be on blockchain. So it sounded very big and something not like how will we achieve this in 4 years, but the country has worked with the same drive that this is how we're going to enable it. Different use cases, starting with land registration. We day before had one of the Department of Health, I think Dubai Health Authority has started giving out licenses to the medical professionals based on blockchain. So various good use cases we see across the globe. And I think all the panelists here one thing has been settled in blockchain 1.0 is over, with blockchain 2.0 is on, where the use cases are coming out. Now, I think we just left with 10 minutes. So we're going to start with the questions. Most of the questions we see around is on the status of blockchain apps. And Satvik, if you could talk about this, that would be interesting.
Yeah, sure. So I think we cannot see the progress of blockchain right now and comment on it, right? So the term blockchain and its power kind of people started analyzing it maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, and before that, whatever that was there was like crypto assets being transferred on top of that, and leave that. That's like part one of it, right? But next thing that has happened is more interesting because we have seen some of the commodities like gold that is actually put on the blockchain by mints. Okay, so they are securing the produced gold and they are issuing the tokens, which could be traded among people, and those particular tokens will have, it will be backed with, let's say one token is backed with 1 gram of gold. Okay, so and post that, what we have seen is the securities of the companies, like the shares or stocks of the companies, which is being traded. But if you see the progression from one step to one step, first we had cryptocurrencies, then it needed some changes so that the commodities can be traded, and then the blockchain needed some changes so that the securities can be traded, because the securities law and those things should to be implemented and all. And next, as we continue forward, I think it will no more be about non-industry specific things like currency or commodity or security. It will slowly go towards more industry specific. Okay. So, and on the other side, we will have to analyze the fact that when people are doing the transactions in these three sectors, when people are doing the transaction, they are able to see and feel that they are a part of the particular blockchain system. Okay, but when it comes to, let's say, food delivery or supply chain delivery, etc., I don't think the effect or the impact of this powerful technology is felt by the end consumer. Because unless I am running a node by myself or understanding what's happening, how do I bother whether Swiggy is using blockchain as a database or technology, or they are using some kind of Oracle and few other things? And at the end of the day, the experience that I would get is more or less the same. So now I need to understand, okay, Swiggy is a centralized entity. It's like one company, and now taking this particular, this particular entity away, how it works. So that is like a very far-fetched thought for a very common man, right? So to take away the intermediary and still make it work. So this is one of the reasons why I think the normal people are not able to appreciate the power of blockchain. But this was very same between 2013 to 15 when it comes to cryptocurrencies. And even today, people don't, when people have limited trust when the transactions is happening on the blockchain for land or commodity or anything. But I think as time goes on, as we build up more products on top of this, the older product will become more familiar. So in other words, my father was very afraid to even get internet banking for his, at one point of time, he was even afraid to get a checkbook, saying what if it reaches some unauthorized hands and something goes wrong. And he always wanted to visit the bank, show his face, do the transactions, and that is the trust he wanted. Then obviously checkbook became mandatory, and then now like doorstep banking or internet banking have become mandatory. So as we keep on going, or maybe as the generations progress, I think whatever is kind of myth and kind of complicated and not able to understand today, it'll become more, I think, say encapsulated or something where you really don't need to know what's happening behind the scenes. But we are not there yet as far as blockchain is concerned. I think that is one of the reasons, as a common man, not many people can recognize it, I think.
Satvik, you're absolutely right. When it comes to a user or a customer interface. Yeah, sorry.
Kokila, I have some views on the adoption of a blockchain. So when I started looking at a blockchain way back in 2016 or 15, since then now, I think if you ask any of the guys who is learning engineering, they ask what is blockchain, or I want to learn blockchain. I think that's the curve which we have seen in the last 4 or 5 years. Nobody was aware of, I think very few people were about a blockchain way back in 2010 or 2000, right? So the way internet has took at least 20-25 years to bring on a food on a mobile app, blockchain will not require those many years. That's the adoption. It will be in the next 2 to 3 years, you will see all of these technology companies will adopt blockchain. That's a curve of a learning curve. The learning curve is quite less. And if you see many engineering colleges, many educational institutes adopted blockchain or bringing the, I think recently TechM along with the Telangana government launched something. Similarly, Amity is launching something. I think that's the adoption of a blockchain. And you will see blockchain will become mainstream, one of the subjects in a, just like AI is there in a curriculum for the students. Similarly, you will also see blockchain should be part of these things. I think that's, you don't have to always see how many use cases are being launched by a country, but you have to see how is the progress around country's regulation, around corporates adoption on blockchain, or around how students are looking at these things. Because tomorrow's students or today's students will become tomorrow's policymakers or tomorrow's practitioners. That way, I think it's a good journey which I have seen in the last 3 years on a blockchain kind of adoption. I think what we are seeing today with the IFTA and just imagine 3 years before, very less number of blockchain conferences used to happen. Today, almost in every conference, blockchain is one of the topic. And some of those conferences are full of only blockchain subjects. I think awareness is too much, and it's really going well. What is needed is around standardization of these protocols, or working on some kind of a strategy where in the government of India, Niti Aayog, just imagine they have come up with the standard part 1 for this paper of a blockchain. Although it is full of only knowledge part, but I think there is something which has really come up from the government of India. So I think when government of India drives, or any of the countries is drive, that's a really, really better kind of adoption for any of those technologies. That way we are blessed. At least more than 10 state governments are adopted blockchain or doing some kind of POCs pilots. If you ask previous CM of Maharashtra, he has narrated blockchain, how blockchain works in a 1 hour. That is the adoption of a blockchain. So somebody is at the top level, knows blockchain. I think we are blessed with I think what is really going on. I think that's how we can adopt right set of use cases. The one which I think Jitan was narrating, Niti Aayog or MITI is doing on pharmaceutical or many other use cases, much needed use cases for a common Indian citizen. Yeah.
Prasanna, you're absolutely right. And I would be a strong believer of this statement where I say that blockchain is now getting its due credit and recognition. So across the globe, and especially from the governments onboarding it, because they've seen that beyond cryptocurrency, what exists. But one of the things that you rightfully mentioned,
China like country says there are more than 500 use cases. Just imagine, and how much investment they have done apart from AI. Blockchain is the heavily invested component for China. That gives a liberty or a competition to other countries. They have to really see this. There is something different in this technology. So that's a way to look at. Yeah.
So going back to the students getting interested, so we have some questions talking about gaming and what's the use case or what we can talk about blockchain and gaming. So we've got Kunal who's gonna mention. Kunal, briefly you could talk about.
Sure. So I think for all of us, we must remember the evolution of Bitcoin and hence blockchain was primarily because of the gamers. We should not forget the first adopters of Bitcoin back in 2010 were the gamers who used to be typically playing tons of network games, and they used to have in-game tokens, in-game goodies like swords, like stuff which they then replaced with a Bitcoin and found it to be really cool and very effective, and they could believe in the limited supply of Bitcoin. All the transactions were validated by millions of miners, or over time that became millions of miners. So I think the gamers had been the early adopters of Bitcoin, and because of Bitcoin, we've eventually got the blockchain technology, and around that we are all talking. So I think if I can just take a little step back. So in gaming, you can all have the tokens, you can have the Bitcoins, and you can have tons of things in it. The thing to remember about blockchain, and I'm trying to sound a little cautiously optimistic here, but just bringing a slightly different perspective, is that blockchain essentially builds trust by independent validations, right? So none of us, I don't know of any app beyond Ethereum smart contract and Bitcoin that has more than 100,000 users. All other things are proof of concept. They are being tried, or they're private blockchains. Private blockchains are essentially private ledgers, and private ledgers have existed like SQLs, Oracles for tons of years, for decades. The tracking a DHL parcel or a FedEx parcel has been happening for more than 20, 30 years. I had been tracking it myself. So frankly, we don't need a private blockchain necessarily. A decentralized technology, which actually slows down things, is expensive if independent validations are there, and is not worth bringing in if there is no independent validation beyond a point, unless there are a group of private blockchain players coming together. So frankly, we should just look at what blockchain brings is a consensus protocol of blockchain, which is how we create the hash, how we all take tons of data, the servers mine according to a protocol. And if 51% of them agree, then a transaction is sealed and it's hashed and there is a hash generated, and everyone has an equal opportunity of coming up with the hash, etc. So the consensus process within gaming for all the network games, where all the gamers could be incentivized to offer their free processing. So, all the gamers have very good devices. They have PS4s, PlayStation 4, they have Xboxes, and they all have very good, strong processors, which could be used actually not only to play, but also to mine and validate and build the consensus on anything that could be very well decentralized, and it need not be centralized within the Riot Games 10-cent servers, or it need not be decentralized in any other game publisher, but it could be reasonably decentralized among all the Fortnite, League of Legends players. And any model around that could be built, which could be interesting, community driven, community mined, and some incentive for all of them to participate in it, whether they are playing or they are not playing, by offering their spare capacity and processing. So these are very, very interesting concepts that are being experimented. And so gaming and blockchain and cryptos had gone hand in hand for a long time. That frankly, Bitcoin would not exist today. I don't think 10 years later, if gamers had not adopted this in 2010, today we would have not heard of Bitcoin or blockchain as much. They played a massive role, and they still have the most adoption potential, more than anyone else in my view, due to the decentralized nature of the gaming world and how the network games operate. So that's going on. Not many proven concepts, many startups trying things, many large companies experimenting with things, but I do see a massive potential there compared with many other use cases that we thought of.
So I think initially it was termed as the millennials technology, and then we live by that.
Right.
So I think we've almost close to closing. So we've got 1 minute if each one of you would like to give your concluding remarks. We start with Jitan. We started with you. So what would you like to conclude the session with?
I think a lot of the questions that seem to be coming is like, what exactly is like blockchain going mainstream? I think I want to address that, right? Blockchain, I'm like, what exactly, when you say mainstream, I guess it's a very relative concept in the end. Blockchain is a technology that basically enables transactions. When I actually do a transaction on Paytm or on Amazon, I don't ask Amazon what exactly technology they're really using. I the experience that I actually enjoy, and that's why I keep going back to it. So I can really question, like when you say mainstream or what production is, I think it's a very broad definitions, because you know what, when you talk production also, when you say a scale of a process being on a scale of 10, when a process has 10 steps into it, probably when I do the whole review, only processes 3 to 4 and 6 to 7 should be worthy of blockchain. And if I put 3 to 4 on blockchain, is that blockchain being production or not? So I'm guessing like these questions that are basic coming in some cases mainstream production and all, I think the right answer is evaluate, first of all, if a change is actually needed. Evaluate if you really need an ecosystem to come together because there's a solution that doesn't seem to be work. For example, NPCI, payments works very well. NPCI is the best in the world. Do I really need to change it and put it on blockchain? No. So I think the evaluation criteria of, you know what, I think it's coming to like, no, don't try to fit blockchain everywhere. Try to figure out the problem really exists. You need to solve it. And if the benefit's going to come from blockchain or not. I think that's the only way blockchain is going to succeed. And that's, I think, all the, in some cases, negative propaganda is going to go away. It's not going to solve food hunger anytime soon. I can promise you that. But again, it's going to be the backbone of the future transactional mode. That would be my closing remark.
Thank you, Jatin. Like, as we said, this is not a magic pill that's going to solve all your problems. See, understand if it's actually needed. Prasanna, your comments on it.
I think really good to be here and heard a lot of good views from all of our other speakers. One way to look at, we have seen the rise of MS-DOS to Windows, right? It took at least more than 20-30 years. And That point in time when MS-DOS came, people used to say that, wow, what a kind of a great operating system. And today also we say same thing for a Windows operating system. Today we at a blockchain 1.0, 2.0 or 3.0, we might say that, wow, very good technology, we should learn it. It should be part of our reskilling exercise or skilling exercise, and every corporate should adopt it. I think that's the evolution, right? And I think after 10 years, we may not talk about blockchain, we'll talk about something else which is right on the blockchain. We don't even speak about internet, which is a backbone of all the networks and many other use cases. Similarly, I think after 10 years, we may not talk about blockchain, but some other use cases which is riding on a blockchain or some other kind of emerging technologies. So good. And when we have to reach out there, it is a responsibility of our practitioners or students or technology companies to come and make blockchain more and more mature sooner or the later, so that ultimately citizen of India or citizen, every countryman or every citizen who is really looking for a very good service, they should be benefited out of it. The journey is so fast these days, and I think it's really good that government of India is really helping, and many more companies are now practicing it out. So one advice to students or corporates who want to, or banks who want to willingly go for a blockchain, start with a small use case. Don't directly jump on a trade finance or cross border or some kind of a crypto use case. Start with a small use case which will govern or involve all of your internal stakeholders, which the use case which will involve your top manager, your CEO, your IT security guy, your testing team, your infra team, so that they understand how to really deploy blockchain as a matter of SDLC, software development lifecycle. Once they understand the small use case, it becomes easy for go for the next steps. And while you're doing this exercise, keep on collaborating with a similar kind of industry. As a bank, I will collaborate with other banks, what they are doing, how they are really bringing on CKYC on blockchain, or is there any kind of another use case which will come up. So I think collaboration with your other industry and practicing at your home on blockchain, that will really help corporates to really succeed on a blockchain journey. And for students, they should mandatorily learn all of these emerging technologies, say blockchain or AI or IoT. And because if they will not run, there are other set of students, they will learn and will move ahead. Even at an age after 10, 20 years, I have personally done courses on big data or AI just to reskill myself. I think reskill is a mantra. I think post-COVID, I think during COVID, we have seen lot of reskilling, skilling exercises are being done. I think keep on learning technology like blockchain and keep on practicing, but start with a small and go slowly towards standardization. So that's one advice from my end.
Thank you. It's a natural progression. So we moved from the whole overwhelming response of a disruptive technology and now accepting it as a natural progression. Satvik, your comments?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to say that one of the main ingredients that will make a blockchain to be efficient and effective is that the stakeholders or the people who are involved with both write or read access should not be trusting each other, right? So if the trust already exists, they don't need blockchain. Okay, so then they can just use any other databases that already exist. So the moment when we say they need not be trusting each other, then one of the huge apprehensions for enterprises is to even get their head around who have always used centralized databases. Okay, so they need to start understanding what is the advantage they get by establishing the trust because of the technology they use and not because of the paper agreements they have, not because of maybe the collateral or anything else they would have done, right? So I think that paradigm shift in the mindset of the people is not there yet. Okay, only when that comes up, I think the real use cases of blockchain would start evolving. So right now, like Jitan was saying, we are trying to force fit blockchain in multiple places, thinking that, okay, it's an IT-based problem, try to see if blockchain can solve it. You know, blockchain is one of the very, very inefficient methods to do a lot of things, which can be achieved centrally, I mean, through some kind of centralized mechanism. So we need to figure out the real issue. So where people are not trusting each other, they are kind of doubting each other. in spite of doubting each other, they need write access to the ledger. And whatever is written on the ledger is supposed to be valid for eternity, right? So this is the kind of thing I would say it as, and there should be multiple people or multiple organizations getting involved. If it is like under one organization, people are not trusting each other, I still think that is not a like solution that blockchain can solve, I think. So overall, like I say, it's like, it's the, the way it is growing, right? So one step at a time, it's the progression. And wherever we are right now is a place where a normal man is absolutely not seeing any benefit of this technology. So when a normal man starts seeing the benefit of this technology, where he's not trusting an organization or a person, but he's able to pull the information and have that feel, right? So when I do a transaction on Paytm, the feeling I have is different. When I do a transaction on Bitcoin, the feeling I have is different. And even though technically there is only one thing, in one side, the Paytm as a company exists, and in the Bitcoin, there is no company exists. At the end of the day, it is saying transaction just happened. That's pretty much is the end of it, right? So I think the eventual solutions that will reach the end of the people, it could be the user interface, user experience, everything should really go to an extent where they can feel they got something more because of the use of the blockchain, which did not exist before. Right. So only the industry-specific blockchains, private blockchains, trying to solve one organization's issue, I think will only, it's like kicking the ball down the road, right? So we'll go a little bit ahead and try to figure it out. We'll go a little bit ahead and try to figure it out. So this pretty much was how the blockchain-based world or the economy and enterprise was even 2 years ago. I did not really see so much of improvement because a lot of times the enterprises which want to just portray that they are doing something in the blockchain, right? So what they achieve is next question altogether, right? So I think the enterprises need to think in this direction as well to see how to put it in the hands of people is what I think.
Thank you, Satvik. Kunal, if you were to write your book Squaring the Blockchain Circle in 2020, would there be any changes you would like to make it, or it's the gospel and we stand by that?
It's still the gospel. So I wrote a book a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think, 2.5 years ago. The aim was to explain blockchain. And then while I was writing, I was researching the use cases. I have a chapter on misuse cases, and we talked some of them in today's conversation as well. So let me just remind everyone of a few facts, some interesting perspectives which may help you. One, Bitcoin is the majorly trusted cryptocurrency in the world. The reason is, the best thing Satoshi Nakamoto did for Bitcoin was never come forward. Because there is nobody in the middle, it's truly being considered a decentralized technology and currency. Without that, if there was somebody in the middle, think about Vitalik at Ethereum. Because he's in the middle, he's a great guy, he's got amazing vision. But because he's in the middle, people have issues with that. People have trust issues. You know, Elon Musk, people have trust issues. So the moment it feels like more like Wikipedia, the moment it feels like more like Linux, which is truly open source, truly decentralized to the largest, to as far as possible extent, I think people believe in it. So that's number one, we must remember. Centralizing any blockchain or Bitcoin use cases will not be really helpful. Second point I want everyone to take away is that blockchain by itself doesn't build trust. The trust is built by independent consensus protocol, in which, in the case of Bitcoin, there are millions of miners. There are millions of validators of every transaction on the ledger. Without them, if let's say I were the only one, or we 5 or 10 were the only ones, tomorrow we can do something wrong. But when the number is so big, it is what builds the truth. Without that, blockchain by itself is not the truth machine. It's a validation by independent group of people. And as long as it reaches a critical mass, that's when the trust building starts. In my view, that's one thing one must also remember. Thirdly, blockchain is an inefficient technology. It's a decentralized technology where you cannot have scale, speed, and efficiency at the same time. You will have to compromise on something. So there's a chapter in my book where I call about scalability trilemma. You can't achieve everything. That's why we say that with Bitcoins, you burn as much energy that could be used for powering a whole country, right? So that's not an efficient protocol. That's what decentralization brings. And lastly, I think I still, at bottom of my heart, I truly believe in the beauty and the concepts of Bitcoin and blockchain both. I do believe in the next 5 to 10 years, these will be the in the stack of the Web 5.0 or whatever version we might want to call it. Especially when machines take over, there are machines driving machines doing work on behalf of machines and humans. I think somewhere when the AI automation takes over, these things will make sense. And I've tried to come up with the next 20, 30, 10 use cases which will make sense with blockchain. And blockchain will essentially, like some of us are saying, will become just one of the internet backbones, which is a SSL layer or a TCP/IP protocol, which nobody talks about. It's just a means to an end. To the user, they are agnostic to what's behind. As long as the internet works, builds a trust. So what internet did was, from Walmart to Amazon, the trust was moved from offline to online, but it was never decentralized. Blockchain helps us get there, hopefully, in due course. But it'll take a while. It'll take another decade or so, in my view. And there are some use cases I've come up with which may make sense in 2030, not today. And with that, I can leave it with a teaser. Squaring the Blockchain Circle. It's available on Amazon. Feel free to take it. And if you get some value from it, great. So I'll not change the book. I'll still keep the same. 2018 to 2020, all that's changes. Bitcoin has gone down from $20,000 to 3,000 back to 10,000. That's it. Nothing else has changed. Everything else is the same, in my view.
And we progressed. We progressed from a lot of proof of concepts to live projects.
With it.
So thank you, everybody. This has been really thought-provoking. And what I must say that these are the real thought leaders that I had the pleasure of talking to from the Indian market. Thank you, Rini and team at India FinTech for organizing this.
Nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all speakers. Thank you for joining us. I thank Mr. Jitan Chandanani. He has to leave the meeting now. Ms. Kokila Alag, Mr. Kunal Nandwani, Mr. Prasanna Lohar, and Mr. Satwik Vishwanath. Thank you all for sharing your insights. I thank all those who are present here and who have taken time to participate in the discussion. And last but not the least, I thank Karm Legal Consultants for supporting this session. Going forward, if you are interested in hosting FinTech webinars, or if you want to know more about the forum, please email to us at info@indiafintech.com. And with that, thank you once again. Thank you for making this such an engaging and interesting discussion. Stay safe and have a great weekend. And the audience, there is a form that if you could, you will be seeing on your screen. If you could just fill up that, it will be very helpful for us. And once again, thank you all speakers. It was a pleasure hosting you. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.